When it came time for my student teaching, income could be a problem. It was the United States Census Bureau that solved that problem when I went to work in a permanent but part-time position 3 years ago. I then took the plunge into Western Governors in August 2005. My job with fifth graders all day, doing census work for about 35 hours a month, keeping track of my son, who was now 16.
That was Bill Sparkman delivering the commencement address at Western Governors University in Salt Lake City, Utah last year after getting his teaching degree there. We thank the school for making that footage available to us. Mr. Sparkman was a part-time field worker for the U.S. Census, a single dad and a cancer survivor who held down 2 jobs while he pursued that degree. Well, on September 12th of this year, Mr. Sparkman was found dead near a cemetery in the Daniel Boone National Forest in rural southeastern Kentucky. Last night, that nearly 2-week-old local news of Mr. Sparkman's mysterious death became breaking national news when an unnamed law enforcement source told the Associated Press that Mr. Sparkman was hanged and that the word Fed, F-E-D, presumably as in federal government, was scrawled on his chest when his body was found. Now, no second source has come forward to confirm the Fed allegation at this point, and a Kentucky State Police spokesman told us today that the AP's initial report on the death contained some errors, but he would not give us specifics on what the errors are. So we're left with a still incomplete, still troubling story. But here's what we know. Mr. Sparkman's body was found on Saturday, September 12th. He reportedly had been dead since the morning previous, since the morning of Friday, September 11th. A determination has still not been made by law enforcement as to whether his death was a homicide, a suicide, or an accident. But police say it definitely was not natural causes. The cause of death has been ruled to be asphyxia. Autopsy results are still pending. As to whether or not Mr. Sparkman was hanged, that detail is becoming complicated and hard to figure. The Lexington Herald-Leader says they were told by the commander of the state police post that's leading the investigation of Mr. Sparkman's death that Sparkman had a rope around his neck that was attached to a tree but was not hanging in the traditional way that many people envision. The state police released a statement today that said Mr. Sparkman was found with a rope around his neck that was tied to a tree, but he was in contact with the ground. Now, the FBI says it's working with local law enforcement on the case, and of course it is a federal crime to attack a federal worker on the job. By and large, though, authorities are being tight-lipped about this investigation. We are meanwhile learning more from area residents about what kind of risks Mr. Sparkman might have been exposed to going door-to-door as a census field worker in that part of the country. And, of course, the question of whether anti-government sentiment might be a plausible motive for violent crime there. The Daniel Boone State Forest, where Mr. Sparkman was found, has been known to have a history of drug-related crime, including growing marijuana and trafficking in meth. Dee Davis, who heads the Center for Rural Strategies in southeastern Kentucky, told the Associated Press today that this is a dangerous time of year in that area because people who grow marijuana are harvesting their crop now. Mr. Davis told the AP, quote, "There are places that you would not send a census worker this time of year." Also, a local retired state trooper says that when Mr. Sparkman told him recently that he was going to be going door-to-door for the census, the state trooper told Mr. Sparkman to be careful, elaborating to the Lexington Herald-Leader, quote, "Even though he was with the Census Bureau, sometimes people can view someone with any government agency as the government." We're joined now by Gilbert Achardo. He's a former Kentucky state trooper. He's retired now. He knew the man who was killed in the Daniel Boone National Forest, Bill Sparkman, for 12 years. He worked with him in an after-school program. He was the first to report Mr. Sparkman missing. Mr. Achardo, first of all, let me say that I'm sorry for our technical issues. Let me also say that I'm sorry for the loss of your friend, and I'm thankful for you joining us here today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
You told Mr. Sparkman to be careful when he was doing census work in the area in which he was eventually killed and where his body was found. What were you telling him to be careful about?
Well, he's used to the London area that's a little more populated, and he told me he was going into counties like Lee County and Owsley County when he did do his census work, and that's a lot more rural, a lot more isolated. A lot of places over there you don't even have phone service. So it was a general statement from a friend to a friend, hey, just be careful when you're over there.
Were you worried about potential criminal activity in the area? Were you worried that he'd get in a car accident and not have cell service? Were you worried about people being specifically unhappy with him working for the census? What in particular made you worry about him going to that part of the state?
Well, really just a couple of things. The road system over there is a little bit, they have smaller roads over there, and I was just afraid for his safety on driving the roads. And I felt like he needed to, when he did his home visits, he needed to make sure that people knew that he was there to collect statistics.
Did he ever express any concern to you about his work with the Census Bureau, any problems he'd ever had on the job?
No, just the opposite. He really enjoyed his census work, and he said people were really good to him.
In terms of this part of southeastern Kentucky, and specifically those counties that you would express some concern about him traveling to, are folks in this area familiar with the census and its purpose? I don't know if there's a way to generalize about that, but is there any fear that you're aware of that the census might be seen as a sort of government intrusion?
No, I'm not aware. Of course, it's been 12 years since I worked for the state police, and I wasn't aware of any problems then, and I'm not aware of any problems like that right now.
In terms of Mr. Sparkman and your friendship with him and his state of mind, I understand that you saw him just a few days before he disappeared. Can you shed any light on the speculation that he might have killed himself?
Well, I can just tell you that I did see him a couple of days before he disappeared, and he had a smile on his face, as he always did, and he was just happy to be there.
There's also been some speculation, in particular because Daniel Boone State Forest has been known to have some marijuana growing, some meth trafficking, some other drug issues. There's been some speculation that this might not have had anything to do with his job. He might have been the victim of a drug-related crime, might have stumbled on a drug-related scene. Does that seem at all plausible to you?
Well, I think that's the big question that we have at school is, you know, what was the cause of death for Mr. Sparkman, and what was he doing over in that area? I'm not even sure that he was doing census work. I don't think that's been confirmed. So the big question is, what was he doing over there, and what was the manner of death and the cause of death?
Gilbert Achardo, former state trooper in Kentucky, friend of Bill Sparkman, whose death in rural Kentucky this month is receiving national attention now. Mr. Achardo, thank you for your time today. And again, you have all of our condolences on the loss of your friend, sir.
Thank you.